Geronimo's first day at the barn was eventful, to say the least. I told the story of that first day in a previous vlog, so I won't go into full detail again, but in case you missed it, here's a quick summary of the horse I started with. He had minimal handling, which became obvious upon meeting him. He was scared to be near people, he injured me while we were loading him on the trailer, he wouldn't walk into the barn, and he almost flipped himself over while lunging. All in all, he had a poor attitude as well as being very timid. Being gelded late probably had something to do with the attitude, but the lack of handling and possible abuse somewhere down his long list of owners definitely played a huge role in all of his issues. On top of all of that, he was also pretty underweight. His condition could have been worse, but he definitely didn't look great. I knew this pony would be a pretty hefty undertaking when I first met him, but that all became even more apparent after his first day at the barn. My first goal with Geronimo was to earn his trust. I think he had a respect for me after that first day. He was like, oh, I can't be a jerk to her. But I also wanted to show him that I was a good person and I wanted to help him. I wanted to be his friend before I asked anything of him. Thankfully, he's a food-motivated horse, so earning his trust was a much easier task than I originally thought. He warmed up to me pretty quickly once he realized I was the one bringing him consistent meals. I spent a lot of time going to visit with him. I'd make sure I had cookies for him and I'd just go give him the cookies and work on him letting me pet him. He was also scared to go past the middle of the arena, and sometimes argumentative about having to leave the gate. I spent a lot of time working on that those first few days as well. While I'd visit with Geronimo, I'd spend some time grooming him, and it seemed as though he had not seen a brush in a very long time. He was very scared of the brush. I had to brush him extremely light and slow so that it didn't terrify him. By Geronimo's third day here, he was really starting to get more comfortable around me. It was getting easier to catch him, something that was taking upwards of 10 minutes to do, and he was walking all the way around the arena with me without putting up a fight. I started walking him over a ground pole, and I was really pleased to see that he didn't care about it at all, because my initial concern was that he would be absolutely terrified of poles, and then that would be a whole ordeal too, but that's not the case at all. The one thing that I did notice about him, and that will be a continual work in progress, is that he gets pushy when he's being led. It's definitely fixable, but it won't happen overnight. The third day, I felt like he had enough trust in me to try walking into the actual barn, and so try we did. As you can see, he wasn't exactly thrilled with the idea, so I did end up using grain to encourage him to walk into the barn. Like I said, he's a food-motivated horse. He was incredibly nervous when he first got into the barn hallway, so nervous that he started shaking. He relaxed more as he was eating his grain, but seeing how much of an ordeal it was for him, I knew it was enough of a win just to have him that far into the barn. So once he was done eating, I put him back in the arena. It's also very important to me to teach Geronimo to trust all people and not just me. He's been pretty good around adults closer to my size, but he was pretty unsure of Riley. I don't know that he's ever seen someone that small before. Either way, it's something that I want to work on with him. I want him to have as many positive interactions as he can with new people. Like I said before, Geronimo did not want to go past the center point of the arena at first. As he got more comfortable, I moved his hay net to the gate connected to the barn hallway so that he would be able to look into the barn and see what was going on. At first, he'd only stay at his hay net for a few minutes at a time and then go back to the gate that he felt safe at, but over the next few days, he started to enjoy seeing what was going on in the barn. Him wanting to stay up at this gate was honestly the most exciting thing for me because I did leave another hay net at the other gate with a little bit of hay in it, so it's not like he had to be up here if he wanted to eat. So it was showing that he was like making a choice to be closer to people, and that honestly just made me so happy. When he first started coming up to the gate, I would sit on the bench in our hallway and I would just sit there and watch to see if he was still there, and then I'd take a picture of him and I kept updating my parents and I'd be like, oh my god, he's back. It really was one of the most exciting parts of this whole process for me. Over the course of the next few days, we continued to develop trust for each other. I started to feel more confident that Geronimo would follow me into new places, and so we slowly started to explore the barn. You can see right here that he's getting so much easier to catch. This is something that improves with him every single day. The day after he first stepped into the barn, he followed me right in without putting up a fight, which was a huge improvement over how he was the day before. Although he still is unsure of things at times, he's becoming willing to figure things out and trust that I won't put him into dangerous situations instead of putting up a fight anytime he was asked to do something he didn't want to do, which in the beginning was basically everything. He was much calmer and he didn't start shaking, so I felt like he would be okay walking further into the barn. I had him stand on the mat like he would do if he was on the cross ties, and then we did our daily grooming routine. I want him to be comfortable standing still while he's being groomed and eventually tacked up before I ever introduce him to cross ties. After grooming, I felt like he'd be okay to see the rest of the barn, so we continued down the hallway, and although he was nervous, he gave everything a chance, and overall it was a good confidence-building experience for him. Once I knew Geronimo would walk through the entire barn, I felt comfortable taking him outside of the barn without having a huge worry that I'd have trouble getting him back in. The first time we left the barn, we went in and out of the indoor. I figured he'd be the most willing to walk back into the indoor since that's where all of his food has been located for the past few days. As his confidence started increasing, we moved on to exploring more of the farm property. I took him into the outdoor and let him look at some of the jumps and also put one of them down for him to walk over. I thought it was kind of funny that the only reason he wouldn't walk over the poles was because he didn't want to go further into the arena, not because he had any actual issue with the poles themselves. He eventually got over it and walked over the poles going away from the gate too. The following day, he was even more at ease, and I felt he was ready to move to a stall. He was hesitant walking in, but it took only a few seconds for him to work through it and follow me in. At this point, I was unsure if he'd ever been stalled before, so I was prepared for him to freak out over being enclosed, but I later learned from a previous owner of his that he had been stalled before. He was tense for the first minute or so being in a stall, but once he realized his food was in there, he was perfectly fine. Throughout the day, he had been very friendly, and so I decided to take his halter off. I figured that with enough treats, I could get close enough to him to get the halter back on, so I went ahead and took a chance. You can see here that I'm holding the lead rope behind my back, and that's because he's very scared of ropes and I can't get near him if he sees it. The only way I could get his halter on at first is if the lead rope was around his neck so that he couldn't get away from me. It was not an easy task getting his halter back on, but I continued to take it off so that he could keep practicing being haltered. And also because I was worried his halter would get caught in his window, and he loves looking out his window into the barn so much that I didn't want to take that away from him. Since he seemed content being in a stall, I left him in it overnight, which meant that his stall needed cleaned the following day. I opted to clean it while he was in it because sooner or later it was something he was going to have to get used to. He kept wanting to follow me out and, well, one time he actually did, but thankfully he didn't go far and he followed me right back into his stall with some grain without me having to halter him. After that incident, I put some grain in his feeder to keep him out of the way, but to still allow him to stay in the stall so that he could see what I was doing. It was a good learning opportunity for him to get used to a human working in close quarters around him. He was of course on guard, but I talked to him the whole time and made sure he always knew where I was at. Overall, he did very good with this whole experience. Today was Geronimo's 5th day at the barn, and the last day I'd be able to work with him until I got back from the horse show next week. He was drastically more comfortable around me, more so than I expected him to be in such a short period of time. Since he was doing so well, I decided to lunge him today because, as we learned his first day here, it was something he needed a lot of work on. When I was walking Geronimo into the arena, I completely forgot that he was not the biggest fan of the end of the ring I took him to. He was pretty good off the left despite that, but off the right, he had more of an attitude about wanting to go. He ended up pulling me to the other end of the arena, but I just went along with it because he was at least working and not rearing up trying to get out of work. I let him have his moment at the other end of the arena, and then we went back to the side we started at. He was much better, so we only trotted a couple circles each way, and then I let him be done. It's always baby steps with green horses. Little victories that add up to your finished product. There's still a ways to go with this guy, but the progress he's made so far is remarkable. I can't wait to continue working with him and see where he goes.